Time to check on that Hibiscus Session Mead. If you're wondering why I did the air quotes, it's because this was a 1.088 session mead. Session meads are usually lower, like 5, 6%. This one can go to like 12. So, it's a little more than a session mead, but, it's all right. It's lower than what we used to make. So all we're going to do is...
If you were paying attention to the airlock, you would have noticed a bubble just popped up. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean anything other than gas went through the airlock.
Yeah. Basically, that's what it means. This has been sitting for about 2 weeks. Actually, it's been exactly 14 days since we made this. I noticed that the airlock activity was very slow, so I thought, why not take a first reading on it? This is in no means a definitive thing. It's just to find out where it's at. Okay, right off the bat, it's got a really nice color. It's like that pinkish hue. But it's also clearing up a little bit already, which is a really good sign. But anyway, on our reading here, 1.000. So this is probably finished, okay? There is a possibility it could go slightly lower because ethanol does have a lower specific gravity than water. So I'm going to pour this right back in here because everything was sanitized in.
The red bucket of sanitization!
And that way we don't have to worry about it. If you didn't clean your tube and your hydrometer, then you don't want to do this because you could infect it. But this is already pretty decently alcoholized. How's that for a good word? Let me actually figure it out. So I'm going to figure out the alcohol percentage of this. But before we do that, let's just put the bung and airlock right back in. That way this is good to go. So go ahead and... This one requires a rubber band because the bung just doesn't want to stay in. Okay, so to calculate the ABV, we start with our original gravity, which is 1.088, minus our final gravity, which we got today. We're going to call it the interim final gravity, because it's not truly a final gravity until it's finalized, which will be the next time. Minus 1.000 gives us a 0.088, and I multiply that by 135 or 135, depending on how you like to say that, and we get 11.88% alcohol. That is pretty respectable. And that's why I can't really call this a session mead anymore. It's just a simple mead. But this is going to sit for a while. Okay, we're just going to let it clear out some more. I do still see bubbles coming up the side. So I'm thinking it's degassing more than it's actually still fermenting. But that could take a few more weeks to fully degas. Yes, you can manually degas if you want to, but I want it to clear out too. So there's no harm in letting it do both things at the same time. And we will see you then. All right, so it's been about 2 weeks, and our last reading was 1.000. So expectation is that this one will be roughly the same. So what I want to do is just get this airlock off of here, and we're going to take a reading. 1.000, so it's spot on. So I just want to take a tiny little sample, because, that's one of the perks of being a home brewer is getting to try it along the way. That means this is ready to rack. So I don't want to pour this sample back in here. I want to pour it into what we're racking it into. And if you notice, we're using one of these gallon containers versus one of these. This holds about 1.2 gallons. This holds 1. So we're going to lose a little bit to the least in the bottom. Therefore, we want to use something slightly smaller, keeping headroom to a minimum. Someone asked recently why headroom is an issue. Well, here's the thing. We might put too fine of a point on it most of the time, I'll be honest, okay? Headroom is important, but it's not the kind of thing where you should be paranoid about, all right? But what can happen is if you have less than 15% alcohol in your brew, you can actually activate acetobacters by adding air to it. So too much headroom gives air to the brew, right?
Beyond that, even if you're past the percentage that would not allow vinegar to occur, you could get off flavors from octazization.
Yep, absolutely. And it could happen. It's not a will, it's not a every time, it's a once in a lifetime maybe. So the off flavors are the kind of thing that might happen and won't necessarily happen every time, but if it did, then it's kind of like a why didn't you just have less headroom and then you wouldn't have had the problem. Anyway, we have our sample here. That is a gorgeous color, first off. It's just really, really pretty. The smell is a little bit young, but not too bad. Taste is nice though. That's actually pretty good. Now this is a dry brew. Okay, this is totally dry 1.000. So That's kind of impressive. And by the way, hibiscus is an amazing anti-inflammatory. So I've taken to at least a cup a day of hibiscus tea, and I brew it with stevia leaves. So it's whole flowers and whole stevia leaves. And I'll tell you what, you don't need to add any sugar to it. It actually tastes really nice and sweet.
If you want to know more about the goodness and wonderfulness that is hibiscus tea, we plan on doing a video just on that very soon on the H&H channel.
I'm being really careful to make sure that the end of my auto siphon doesn't get too into the lease here, because there is some pretty wispy lease in the bottom. We are going to have a little bit of loss with this one, just because that's the way it is sometimes. But as you can see, I'm still at about the shoulders of the jar, so it's pretty much a full gallon. We didn't lose that much, a couple ounces really.
But we need an airlock!
Yes, we do. That's another thing we've been asked lately is, do I need to put an airlock on in secondary or conditioning phase? Yes, absolutely, because it could be degassing. There could be still a slight amount of fermentation going on, so you just want to stay safe. It's no big deal to put an airlock on it, so, you know, just better safe than sorry. But what are we going to do with this now?
We're going to let it sit.
This will sit. I don't think it has to sit all that long. Probably maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. It's already clearing. It's getting fairly clear as it is.
Yeah.
So we'll just give this a little bit of time, and then we'll be back to bottle it. So another week has gone by, exactly 7 days, and, well, I'm going to say this is clearing up really nicely. There's not a lot of sediment in the bottom here, so it's time to take our final determination taste. Basically what that means is I'm going to put some in a glass, we're going to drink it, and determine if we want to alter anything before we put it into bottles. It may need to be degassed as well, so we may be putting this into a pitcher. I was hoping to be able to just go right to bottles.
Actually, isn't that bad.
I smell something in there, so yeah, it smells a little footy to me. Well, I haven't tasted it yet, so. Maybe it's just because it's warm.
You get it on the taste.
I do get a little on the taste, but do you think this needs to be sweetened? It's a tough call.
It's a tough call.
This finished at 1.000, so this is officially dry. I like hibiscus though.
Yeah, like now that the forward young fermentation taste is gone, I'm just getting the residual hibiscus, and it's got that tart cleansing thing going on.
It's actually kind of nice. It
It's
tastes like a nice dry red wine.
Yeah, I don't really know if I want to mess with it.
Okay, then we won't mess with it. We will bottle it dry.
Other than age.
I do think it needs to be degassed though before it goes in, so we are going to rack it to a pitcher first. I was hoping to just go straight to bottle because we always go to a pitcher first, but in this case, this is young enough. This was started on April 13th. It's now May 18th, so it's only like 4 or 5 weeks. I'd like to degas this a little bit. It might actually help with that flavor. So we're going to rack. All right, so as always, we use an auto siphon. We're putting the cap on, even though not sure we really need to this time, but we're going to do it anyway just to make sure that if there's any least at the bottom, it doesn't get into our pitcher. Pitcher down here, auto siphon up here.
Sanitizer liquid is cold, apparently.
And we're just moving the liquid from one vessel to another. In case you were curious, this came out to 11.8% ABV. How did I arrive at that? I think we did that already in the earlier section of this, but 1.088 original gravity minus 1.000 final gravity times 135 gives us 11.88%. I just round down a little bit to 11.8%. So being that this is still kind of young, I want to make sure that it's fully degassed. And all that means is I'm going to stir it up, okay? I'm being very careful how I stir it, though. I'm just giving it a few turns and then going backwards with the spoon. I see some bubbles coming up, not a huge amount. So I'm just going to give this a couple minutes of degassing. There are a million ways to degas. You can use vacuum pumps. You can use a drill with there's an attachment that goes on it that you can put in there. For this volume, though, it's almost overkill. So that's why I just do this. You do want to be careful, though, that you don't introduce more oxygen. Okay, so something that people ask a lot is, how do you know when you're done degassing? Well, in my opinion, you can actually never be finished degassing. There's always going to be a little bit left, no matter what you do. But what I do is I go until it's reasonable. Okay, I went maybe 5 minutes on this one. There wasn't much left. Derek was washing the bottles up and we were talking, so 5 minutes passed pretty quick. Probably didn't even need 5 minutes. Some brews need 10 minutes. Some brews need 15 minutes. But I go until not a lot of bubbles are coming back up. And in this case, it's just an extra cautionary step. We know it's not going to re-ferment. Those extra little bit of bubbles in the long term aren't going to hurt anything. Just I'm trying to get some of that off-gassing out so that the flavors go away. The pressure of the gas isn't really so much of an issue. It's those odd flavors that the gases tend to hold. And now we're just going to put it in bottles, which is the same thing as racking, except that we use one of these on the end of our tubing. It lets the liquid flow or not flow as you push it into the bottle. And that's it. So there we go. 4 bottles and a little bit. This I'm going to put in the fridge. Might add a little bit of artificial sweetener to it and drink it myself right away. Now, we normally, you were about to say that. Go ahead.
We normally do tastings right away, but we did notice that this still had some of that young essence, which is why we did the degassing and why I recommended that we actually let this age. We're always telling you to let it sit, so why don't we take some of our own advice and let this age out a little bit before giving you a final tasting.
Now, the big question is going to be how long? I'm saying maybe like a month. Just a little bit longer, because we do tend to do our tastings young as it is. So we are still going to do a 1 year from like bottling day today, but I think a month should give this just a little bit time to mellow and be just that little bit better. So if you like this video, look up another one up there. You might like that one too.